Fiona Marsh was standing at the edge of my kitchen counter in a bridesmaid dress, the color of dusty rose, holding a tube of superglue and a broken heel, and I was trying very hard not to say anything that would make the next 10 minutes more complicated than they already were. The heel had snapped clean off on my front steps. She'd driven 40 minutes from her apartment to mine, because she needed someone with steady hands and bad enough judgment to attempt shoe surgery 2 hours before her best friend's wedding. That someone was apparently me. "Hold it," she said. "I'm holding it. You're holding it crooked. I'm holding it the only way it fits." She exhaled through her nose, in that particular way she had when she disagreed with me, but didn't want to spend the energy proving it. I pressed the heel flat against the sole and counted to 30 in my head, while she stood very still, one hand on my shoulder for balance, and looked at the wall above the refrigerator like she was doing math. We had known each other for almost 3 years. It started at a grad school orientation mixer that neither of us had wanted to attend. She was in architectural history. I was finishing an MFA in photography. We'd both been standing near the beverage table with the mutual understanding that the drinks were bad and the conversation was worse. And she'd said, without looking at me, "If one more person asks me what I want to do with a degree in architectural history, I'm going to start listing things that aren't true." I said, "What kinds of things?" She said, "Competitive falconry, international cheese arbitrage, whatever sounds expensive and confusing enough that they stop asking." I laughed. She finally looked at me, and that was more or less how it started. We called each other study partners first, then the kind of friends who texted at 11 on a Tuesday about whether a specific building in Prague was brutalist or just unfortunate. Then the kind who showed up when things went sideways, which happened more than either of us planned for. Her fellowship fell through in the spring of our second year. My show got dropped 3 weeks before the opening. We took turns being the person who sat on the floor of the other's apartment, eating cold noodles and not saying much. We called each other best friends because it covered everything without requiring us to be precise. That was still what we called each other. Even now, with her hand on my shoulder and the hem of her dress brushing my knee and the superglue fumes getting into my head a little. "Okay," she said. I released the heel carefully. We both looked at it. "That might actually hold," I said. "It has to hold for 6 hours. Then don't do anything dramatic." She gave me a look that meant she could not promise that. Fiona was a bridesmaid in Kendall's wedding, which was an all-day production at a restored farmhouse venue outside of Charlottesville, Virginia. I was not in the wedding party. I had been invited as her +1 because her actual +1, a guy named Derek she'd been seeing since January, had ended things 3 weeks ago in a way she described only as disappointing, but not surprising, which is somehow worse. She hadn't cried about it. Not really. She'd come over, changed into an oversized flannel she'd left at my place the previous fall, half a pizza, and said, "I keep picking people who are good at seeming available." That was Fiona. She didn't collapse. She just said the true thing quietly, and then went about her life. So when she called and asked if I'd come to the wedding, I said yes, before she even got to the part about the open bar. "I've always liked Kendall," I said, which was true enough. "You've met Kendall twice. Both times were good." She laughed. That particular laugh, small and surprised, that she tried to stop before it finished, and that was how I ended up in a suit at 8 in the morning, holding a broken shoe together with the careful attention of someone who understood that this mattered. The venue was 2 hours away. We took my car because hers was making a sound she described as concerned, and I described as critical. She sat in the passenger seat with the shoe on the floor, and her heels in her lap, and one knee pulled up, reading something on her phone that kept making her frown in a way that looked like concentration rather than worry. Though with Fiona, those were sometimes the same thing. She'd pulled her hair up in some complicated arrangement that I understood was formal. There were small pearl pins in it. She was wearing the kind of earrings that swung when she turned her head. About 40 minutes in, she put her phone down and looked at the road. "Derek texted," she said. "Okay. He said he hoped I had a good time today. That's not nothing. It's also not something," she said. "He does this. Says the right words in the right order, without any actual weight behind them." She looked at her hands. "I spent 8 months trying to figure out if I was reading too much into things, or not enough, and I still don't know." I didn't say anything for a second. "You're not bad at reading things," I said. She glanced at me. "You don't know that. I've known you for 3 years. She was quiet. Then, "That's the thing about you, James. You say stuff like that like it's just a fact." I kept my eyes on the road. "It is just a fact," I said. She turned to look out the window, and I caught the smallest movement at the corner of her mouth before she put it back. The farmhouse sat on a long gravel drive, lined with cedar trees. When we pulled up, it looked like something a set decorator had built to prove a point. White trim, climbing wisteria on the south wall, a pond with actual ducks that had clearly been there long enough to understand they were charming and were using it. Fiona got out, slipped both heels on, tested the repaired one carefully. "Still holding," she said. "I told you. Don't take credit yet. Give it until the reception." She walked ahead of me toward the side entrance, where the bridesmaids were gathering, and I watched her go, with the specific feeling of someone who was about to spend the next 6 hours pretending something was not true. The ceremony was exactly what you'd expect from Kendall, who apparently had opinions about flower arrangements that extended to each individual table. The officiant told a story about the first time Kendall's now husband thought he was dreaming and stayed up until 3 a.m. Googling whether soulmates were statistically possible. Fiona stood at the front with the other bridesmaids and kept her face composed and lovely, and I sat in the 7th row and watched her instead of the couple, about 30% more than was probably appropriate. After, during the cocktail hour on the lawn, I found her near the drink table. "How's the heel?" I said. She looked down, holding. The ceremony wasn't dramatic enough to test it. She took a glass of white wine. "How was it from the back?" "Beautiful," I said, and then realized I had not clarified what I meant. She looked at me. The afternoon light was doing something specific to the way she was standing. The way the dress moved when she breathed, the small pearl pins still in her hair. Her eyes stayed on mine for a second longer than usual. "I meant the floral arrangements," I said. "No, you didn't," she said, and then Kendall swept past in 12 pounds of silk and grabbed Fiona's arm with the focused energy of a woman who had been waiting for this day for 18 months and was not going to waste a single second of it. Fiona looked back at me, once over her shoulder. The expression on her face was something I couldn't name fast enough before she was pulled away. The reception was inside the farmhouse's main hall, which had exposed tists, beams and string lights and enough candles to qualify as a fire code question. I found my seat at a table with people I had never met, but who were, as far as I could tell, all part of Fiona's graduate school orbit. One of them was a guy named Graham, who'd apparently been in her seminar on 19th century urban planning and who seemed to have very detailed opinions about her dissertation topic and her general direction in life. He was not unfriendly. He was just the kind of person who talked to Fiona like she was a project he'd been consultantless on for a while without being asked. I watched her handle him the way she handled most things, with patience that looked effortless, because she'd practiced it long enough that the effort didn't show anymore. At some point she excused herself to help Kendall with something involving a bustle and a safety pin, and Graham turned to me and said, "How do you know Fiona?" "Photography school," I said. "We overlapped in grad school." He nodded. "She's brilliant. You know that, right? Like, actually rare. It's just." He tilted his head. "She makes it hard. gets very in her head. Has this whole thing where she's more comfortable being the person someone calls than the person doing the calling. I picked up my water glass. She seems pretty comfortable to me, I said. He smiled like I'd said something naive. You probably haven't needed anything from her yet. There it was. Not a lie, exactly. Fiona did sometimes disappear into capability. She did sometimes help people more readily than she let people help her. But Graham said it like it was a flaw he'd catalogued, not a thing he'd tried to understand. I looked at him. I said, she's called me plenty, and I just answer. His expression shifted. Before he could say anything else, Fiona came back from the bridal suite, with a safety pin between her teeth and a look on her face that said the bustle situation had been more complicated than anticipated. She sat down, removed the safety pin, and looked between us. What did I miss? She said. Nothing worth repeating, I said. Graham looked at his phone. She looked at me. Something passed between us that wasn't quite a question but felt like one. On the dance floor, about an hour into the reception, Kendall pulled Fiona into a slow song that became a group of bridesmaids in a loose circle, laughing and stepping on each other's hems. I watched from the edge of the room. The repaired heel was surviving. Fiona looked like herself, which was to say she looked like someone who was actually enjoying the moment when she wasn't aware of being watched. When the song changed to something faster, and half the group dispersed toward the bar, she made her way over to me. You're standing in the corner, she said. I'm standing near the corner. There's a difference. What's the difference? The corner implies avoidance. I'm just adjacent to the wall. She tilted her head. You've been quiet. You were busy. I was. She looked at the dance floor. Graham said something, didn't he? I kept my face still. How do you know that? Because you went very polite when I sat back down. She looked at me. He has a theory about me. I heard. It's not entirely wrong, I know. She blinked, clearly not expecting agreement, I said. But it's not entirely his to have. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She looked at me for long enough that I started to wonder what I'd said wrong. James, she said. Yeah. She looked at her glass. Nothing. Never mind. Fiona. She shook her head, but her jaw tightened. I'm fine. I'm good. It's a wedding and the heel is holding and everything is fine. I didn't push. I'd known her long enough to understand that the things she said were fine at weddings often weren't, but that she needed the event to end before she'd admit it. We'd danced once toward the end of the night, because Kendall requested it personally, and Fiona was incapable of saying no to Kendall on her wedding day. It was a mid-tempo song, something from the 90s, familiar enough that a few other couples came out too. She put her hand in mine, and we found a loose rhythm that didn't require much discussion. I'm still thinking about what you said, she said, into the space between us. Which part? She looked at me. The part about it not being his to have. The theory. I shrugged. You're not a case study. She was quiet for a step or two. He dated a woman in my cohort for 2 years. After it ended, she told me he spent most of it explaining her to her. That sounds exhausting. It does. She paused. I keep ending up with people who are more interested in having a version of me than in actually knowing me. I didn't say anything. Right away? Then, what does actually knowing you look like? She looked up at me, slow. Like the question had surprised her somewhere underneath. I think, she said carefully, it looks like someone who already knows I'll steal their leftovers without asking and still makes extra. I laughed. She felt it. Her hand tightened in mine just slightly. It looks like someone who doesn't explain me to myself, she said, quieter. We'd stopped moving quite as much as the music required. Fiona? I said. No, she said. No. I know, James. She said it again, and this time there was something in it that wasn't deflection. It was acknowledgement. The kind that comes right before someone decides whether to keep the door closed or let the air in. Right in the comments. Do you think Fiona had already known for a long time? Or did it take someone finally refusing to look away? Her phone buzzed in her small woven clutch. Once, twice. She glanced down out of reflex, then back at me. Her expression flickered. "It's Kendall," she said. "Bustle emergency. Again." "Of course it is." She stepped back, but her fingers held onto mine for an extra second before letting go. Just that. An extra second. Long enough to be deliberate. Then she was gone across the dance floor, heels clicking. And I was standing in the middle of a wedding reception, with my heart doing something unreasonable. I found a seat at the edge of the room, and stayed there long enough for the speeches to finish, and the cake to be cut, and for Graham to leave, which he did without fanfare. Shaking hands around the table, and giving me a nod, that I returned without warmth. Celia. I mean, one of Kendall's other bridesmaids, a woman named Rosie, who had been quietly and efficiently managing the evening's chaos with a walkie-talkie clipped to her bouquet, appeared at my elbow. She said, "Fiona talks about you, you know." I looked at her. "Okay," she said. "She calls you when things go sideways." She paused. "She doesn't call a lot of people." "I know that," I said. Rosie tilted her head. "Derek used to complain that her job had too many late nights." I figured. She looked at me the way people look when they've decided something. "You carried an extra set of superglue in your coat pocket this morning. I saw you check it in the parking lot." I had. Just in case the first repair didn't hold through the day. I didn't say anything. Rosie nodded like I'd confirmed something she already believed, and walked back toward the bridal table. Outside, the farmhouse had a long porch that ran along the back, facing a field that was dark now, except for a string of market lights. Someone had hung between two fence posts. I found Fiona there 20 minutes before midnight, shoes off, standing barefoot on the wooden boards with her arms crossed, looking at the lights in the field. She heard me come out but didn't turn around right away. "Bustle is handled," she said. "Good." "Rosie gave me a look when I came out here," she said, like she knew something. "Rosie is observant." She finally turned. Her hair had come down a little more, a few of the pearl pins relocated to her clutch. Her lipstick had faded. She looked like the version of herself she kept quieter, the one I trusted most, because it was harder for her to perform. "You've been patient with me," she said. "For a long time. That's not a difficult thing to be." She exhaled, and it sounded like something she'd been holding for a while. "I have this thing where it's easier for me to be useful than to be seen. I know that. I've always known that. Derek said it, too, just." She stopped. "He said it like it was a limitation. Like I came with terms and conditions." "It's not a limitation," I said. She looked at me. "It's just something that takes longer to get past," I said. "I've been past it for a while." Her breath moved. I watched it. "How long?" she said. It wasn't quite a question. "Longer than I planned for," I said. The field lights swayed slightly in whatever breeze was moving through. Somewhere inside, the DJ switched to something slow, and probably sentimental. She took one step toward me. Then another. Not fast, not dramatically, just 2 steps. Like she'd made up her mind about something she'd been thinking about for longer than tonight. I moved toward her at the same time. I kissed her on that back porch, with the field lights behind her, and the music barely audible through the farmhouse walls, and her hands coming up to my jacket lapels. The way hands do, when they finally decide they're allowed to. She kissed me back without hesitation, which was how I knew she'd been deciding this for a while too. When we pulled apart, she kept her forehead close to mine. "That was not a best friend move," she said. "No," I said. "It wasn't." She laughed, quiet and real, into the collar of my jacket. "I should go back in," she said. "Kendall will notice." "I know." She stepped back but kept one hand on my arm. Her eyes moved over my face in the dim light, taking stock of something. "Don't go anywhere," she said. "I'm easy to find," I said. "I'll be the one pretending I didn't carry backup superglue." She pressed her lips together. The corners of her eyes went soft. Then she turned and went back through the farmhouse door, heels in one hand, and I stayed on the porch, long enough to understand that the careful, unnamed thing we'd been carrying between us for 3 years had just been set down in the best possible way. I drove us home after midnight. She'd changed out of the bridesmaid dress in the venue's coat room and was in a pullover and jeans. By the time we got to the car, the pearl pins wrapped in a napkin in her clutch. She sat the same way she always did, one knee pulled up, except this time when she reached over and rested her hand over mine on the console. Neither of us commented on it. Every red light felt quieter than usual. At her apartment building, I walked her up like I had 100 times before. Same elevator, same long hallway with the abstract print outside 4B that she'd told me 3 separate times she found aggressive. Same key in the same lock, but when the door opened, she turned around. "The dress," she said. "I mean the zipper, on the bridesmaid dress. I couldn't reach it in the coat room, and I've been wearing the thing all day and—" She stopped, held up the garment bag she was carrying. "Sorry, I know it's late." I took the bag from her. She turned. The zipper tab was a small metal pull at the top of the back. I found it, worked it down slowly. The room was quiet. Her shoulders dropped as the tension in the fabric released. "Thank you," she said. "For the zipper?" She glanced at me over her shoulder. "For everything else." I let the silence hold that for a second. "You were wonderful today," I said, even when things kept going sideways. She turned around fully. Her hair was half down now, the last few pins somewhere in the clutch or the carpet. And she looked at me the way she had on the back porch. Open and certain in a way she usually kept for private. "I've been waiting," she said, "for someone to stop making me feel like too much." "You're not too much," I said. She reached up and folded both hands against my chest. Not pulling, just holding me there. "I know," she said softly. "That's what I mean." 3 weeks later, Kendall texted Fiona a photo from the wedding photographer's gallery. The 2 of us on the dance floor. Her head was tipped slightly down. I was saying something. She was almost smiling. The real one she didn't usually let people catch. Kendall's caption said, "I told Rosie I'd give it 6 months. She said 3 weeks. Neither of us are surprised." Fiona forwarded it to me with no caption. I sent back, "Rosie was right about a lot of things." She replied, "Don't tell her that. She'll never let either of us forget it." I still had the second tube of superglue in my coat pocket. I kept forgetting to take it out. Or maybe I kept not forgetting. Some things stay where they belong.